Welcome to Navigators of the Commonwealth, our sports edition for the fall. Made it to Navigators session 9. Wonderful to see everybody here. We'll just take a minute for everybody to get situated. And I'll go ahead and pull up our icebreaker question here. What's your favorite thing about sports culture in the fall? And then, of course, go ahead and let's go ahead and get your names as well, your sports names. The team will drop that name generator out in the chat. Yeah, fan base, totally. The fan base is the best. They're crazy people. It's actually pretty exciting that we're doing this as a theme because I'm a University of Oregon alumni, and we have our big Penn State matchup coming up this weekend. So a lot of hype. Other favorite things. Ooh, Megan Bennett, Meg says charcuterie boards and cute sweatshirts. I don't know the whole fundamentals of football. That's the best part about it, is you really don't have to know what's going on to have a fun time with being there. Priscilla says, spending time with my adult son, and watching games or attending football games. Oh, and my chat here is blocking the Menti. Okay, so what's your favorite thing about sports culture? We have stuff coming in on the Menti as well. Tribalism, yes, totally, right? It's the ultimate tribalism. And then Taylor Swift, right? Number 87 girl. Yes, I love that too. I love Taylor Swift and the whole thing with Haley Steinfeld and Josh Allen as well. All right, so I think we're done with the music. We'll do one more time through the hype here. Oh, got NFL on CBS as folks are signing in. Getting hyped. Oh, tailgating at Bengals games. Yes, absolutely. Oh, Kristen is outing herself as a Bears fan. Okay. Tony the Blitz Navigator Baker. Love these names. This is great. Shauna O'Nean says her favorite thing about sports culture is going to football games on Sundays. Looks like awesome. Welcome, Katie. So glad to have you here. Please go ahead and sign in. Share your favorite thing about sports culture and the chat here. Yes, Jamie, DeMar Chase, our boy. Joey B is out for the rest of the season, but we're going to make it work. DeMar's going to make it work. Thank you all for getting plugged in. We'll get started in just a minute here. Be sure to get your sports name or give yourself one that reflects your tribal allegiances. Yes, the snacks, the fan base, the themed outfits, all of the things. Oh, and Christy says that her dad was a college and high school football coach for 30 years. So my favorite thing about my childhood as a coach's daughter, my dad was too. Football, wrestling. What else did he do? All the things. So Christy, that's another reason we get along so well. Varsity Valerie says, reminds us of our question. What's your favorite thing about sports culture? Well, your dad did wrestling too. Oh my gosh. I think our dads are the same person, Christy. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our hype music here. And I think my chat here is blocking the screen. So I'll ask for my team members to help us with letting folks into the room, if you would. That would be great. Oh, yeah, Sharon, absolutely. The band geek and the band mom, all of that stuff. The whole band culture is amazing. Oh, yes. So Shauna was saying that going to the football games on Saturday to go watch her son play at EKU. That's amazing, Shauna. He's on the team. Yes, cheerleading is amazing too, especially our cheerleaders at UK. They are so freaking talented, top in the nation. So cool. What else is in our sports culture here? Okay, themed outfits, Jamar Chase. Yes, energy, celebrating together. Yes, love all of those different kinds of things. Amazing. Yeah, and Steph Miller, I like the energy on game day too. It's such high energy. Several folks agreed with that as well. All right. Well, welcome on in. Thank you all for getting hyped for our sports themed conversation today. So, with our Navigators presentation here today, give me 1 second to pull this up into full screen. Hopefully, this will cooperate with us. So, we are focusing on this kind of theme of cultural humility through the lens of sports culture, because I think that sports culture really gives us a helpful way to think about all the positive ways that culture supports our understanding of people's different ways of doing and being in different kinds of cultures, whether we're thinking about organizational culture, community culture, all of those different kinds of components here. And I'm going to pull up my notes. Give me 1 second to pull up our notes to introduce the session. So be sure to keep chiming in on the chat and your favorite thing about sports culture here as I pull this up and get us oriented. So again, really excited to have returning players and a warm welcome to our new recruits we've already heard about here in the chat. Our conversation today about cultural humility beyond competence to true understanding, like I was saying, is grounded in this kind of recognition of the fun of coming back to the fall culture of fall sports. So today we're going to be learning about strategies for building strong and trusting teams with other helpers and our clients by avoiding making assumptions about each other's favorite home team cultures. So we all have our favorite sports team, our coach, our mascot, our sport, and game time traditions, like we've set out in the chat with a mentee. And as crazy as some of us can get about our squads, don't even get me going on the Oregon Ducks, we all respect each other's teams and the ground rules for the sports cultures we love, which is at the heart of cultural humility. So today we're going to be connecting the dots between cultural humility and our lessons learned back in session 2 on biases and assumption. So time to blow the whistle, woo, woo, and start the game clock as you put on your cheerleader, coach, referee, and player uniforms. Or I guess, let's face it, you're playing all of these roles as helpers here. So again, chiming in on your favorite thing about sports culture, just a reminder here on this slide about our ground rules for how we want to navigate the session. Take a look at those different ways that we always want to be in conversation with each other and as engaged as possible. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we mean by culture, right? So we can think about culture as our ways of living. That's an easy way to define culture. Our ways of living, including everything from how we dress and speak to what we eat, our beliefs, our values, where and how we live, and our customs and celebrations for life events. And like I was saying before, family units, organizations, and schools, as well as communities and countries, can have distinct and shared cultures. So the idea with cultural competency is that we are becoming aware of our own culture, our own ways of living, and being humble and open about our clients' cultures. So one of the critiques that comes up when we're talking about cultural competence as an idea, does that just make us push us into cookie cutter stereotyping and stigmatizing of people because we assume that we know everything about how a family might live, for example, based on their background, right? So a family is from a specific kind of country or background context. And if we're culturally competent, we might make assumptions about the kinds of stereotypes associated with that culture if we don't get to know that family or that community or that help-seeking individual as a person. So again, moving from cultural competency into this idea of cultural humility, we can never become totally culturally competent. We can continue, though, to activate our curiosity, our humility, and our self-awareness so that we don't default into this kind of cookie cutter stereotyping and stigmatizing of folks based on our assumptions about their culture here. So just as a little bit of a reminder for what we talked about in session 2 here, when we're thinking about cognitive biases around culture, and we're thinking, oh, I know exactly who this person is and how they live and what their values are just based on how they look or their different kinds of ways that they identify. This really makes a lot of sense given what we know about cognitive bias, right? Where there's so many different forms of shortcuts that our brains take to make sense of our incredibly complex world. All of the information, all of the different kinds of factors that we encounter. Our brains are conditioned. That's their job, is to help us to reduce the complexity of what is going on around us and help us to find patterns. But unfortunately, that leads to different kinds of biases where we have different kinds of ways of thinking about people and situations that might be shortcuts that overemphasize different kinds of qualities of communities over the individuals that we're interacting with. So in order to overcome cognitive biases, those shortcuts, those heuristics we have for making sense out of complex realities that come at us here, we want to be able to cultivate that cultural humility of really getting to know each individual person. And remember, again, all of these different types of cognitive biases have all been validated and studied in different kinds of research. So it really is an interesting way to think about how our brains operate here and the kinds of challenges that we face in encountering difference and newness every day in our work as helpers. So the last little piece I wanted to highlight here that I think is important for us to consider when we're talking about cultural humility is this framework for stigma that we have in the sociological literature that takes us through some of the different steps of what constitutes a stigma. So like I was saying before, cultural competency can kind of shade into cookie cutter stereotyping if we're seeing people as how we understand their culture rather than how they understand it themselves. So when we look at this framework here, I'll just guide us through some of the definitions. Look at the playing field here. It says power is the playing field, right? So with this power playing field, we're talking about the ways in which we as helpers have power over often lots of different elements of the people who are helping us, whether they're going or who are seeking help from us, whether they are able to access different kinds of services. We are kind of the gatekeeper for those resources and services. So we're inherently, as helpers, in a position of power in relationship to help seekers. So that's the playing field in which these stigma constructs, these stigma ideas kind of play out. So the way that stigma works is it starts out first with this foundation of power and that power difference between the helpers and the help seekers. First, we may find that we are leading into stigma, that we're distinguishing and labeling differences between people. So you're thinking about this person is a Bears fan, this person is a Bengals fan. There's something categorically different between these folks. Then that labeling can lead to stereotyping, where we are connecting labeled differences to negative attributes and stereotypes. So in my case, all Bengals fans are geniuses, all Browns fans are crazy, right? That would be a stereotype where we're connecting different kinds of labeled differences to negative attributes or poor qualities there. Then in the stigmatization process, the idea is the labeling and the stereotypes lead us to place labeled and stereotyped people into us versus them categories and experiencing social rejection as a result. So, for example, Browns fans are not welcome to my tailgating parties in this kind of separation example I'm sharing here. Then the last component of how the stigmatization process works is status loss and discrimination, in which the labeled person experiences perhaps a reduced social status and subjected to discrimination, such as lack of access to housing, employment, and healthcare. So in my kind of silly example here, status loss and discrimination might take the form of, in addition to, I'm not inviting you to my tailgate party, but I also don't see you as being smart enough to be able to be on my work team because you support those silly Browns instead of the Bengals here. So again, just providing some different kinds of ideas around how culture can become some of these kinds of concepts that maybe don't serve us in getting to know specific individual people who are seeking help from us and building those trusting relationships that we work on with Navigators. So turn it over to Valerie here to lead us through our next interactive exercise.
Hello, everyone. Varsity Valerie here, ready for a victory. All right, so we have another Menti poll, and just to pause before we continue with some more rich lessons here. But our question is, which of the following assumptions have you noticed in your work? So we have assuming assistance status based on race, ethnicity, and or perceived socioeconomic or legal status, expecting assimilation into professional culture, using language that centers professional culture norms, making medical notes that may stigmatize certain groups, or expecting compliance without considering barriers and social needs. So to interact with this, we would go to menti.com. The code is there, 998791750, or you can use the QR code. So let's see. Answers coming in. There's a lot for expecting compliance without considering barriers and social needs. I have a wonderful example from that from yesterday, but I don't know if you all want my mini TED Talk right now. All right, let's see. There's a lot for that one. Expecting. It is, I will say, it's very difficult when the predominant culture. You do, Megan, you do want it. I was so very quick. I got a toll, like I drove through a toll, I guess a couple of months ago, but my car is leased, so it went to the leasing company first and then came to me after the due date. So I got a late fee. And I called them and they wanted me to fill out a PDF, give them a copy of my lease, all this stuff. I mean, like five different documents to prove that even the letter itself said that it was postmarked past the due date. And I just thought about people that English isn't their first language, people that don't have access to a scanner. And then I thought, well, maybe they would just pay it because it's too difficult. And so, when society is designed around the norm and isn't inclusive, it's easy for people to be in the margins. So there, I gave you all my TED Talk. So we can move on. It seems like there is a lot. We've got a few mixed responses otherwise. We can move to the next slide. All right, so why does cultural humility matter? So, humility, as we've heard, helps us avoid the trap of knowing it all and instead encourages us to listen, ask, and respect each person's unique story. So, structural competency is the awareness of how social, economic, and legal systems impact health and access to services. Power and privilege does not mean that you get things. It may just mean you don't have barriers. You work hard, but no one's actually stopping you. So power and privilege shape every interaction. Being mindful is essential. So just kind of think of, and you can answer this in the chat because I'm wondering here, like what assumptions have you seen that may have unintentionally harmed client relationships? So keep that thought in your head because we are going to do some peer learning here and move on to breakout rooms for a little more discussion. So I would love for you all to share some experiences. I just gave you all an example of the toll, so maybe that brings something up for you. And please remember, with these conversations about, potential cognitive biases, potential assumptions, maybe people have learning curves, they may just have limited perspectives based on, the depth of their own experiences, the opportunity to meet other people that are not like them. So remember that this is meant to be a safe space to learn. We are not here to judge other people. This is a learning space, but I would love for you all to discuss if you can think of a time when assumptions about culture or identity affected your interaction with a client or a colleague. So maybe thinking of, what assumptions were made? How did that affect the person's feeling of safety or trust? And what might you do differently now?
All right, great. I'm working on getting our breakout rooms set up here. Susanna and Kristen. All right, Kristen, I'll move you down to our room 3 here. We'll go ahead and open all the rooms. And we'll go ahead and take about 10 minutes together in our breakouts to reflect on this and come back together. Please let me know in the chat if anybody is having trouble getting into your breakouts. I can resend you there or come off mute and I will help.
Try opening one of like the chat now. There's something at the top that's gray, but I feel like that's like your settings. Oh yeah, it's still there. Wonder what's going on.
Doesn't do that usually.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes me all paranoid that people can't see what's in like what I'm doing, right? It just is a box. That is so weird.
Right. It's just like a grayed out like blank space. But the problem is it's like opening over the brick like that at the top is not so distracting, but when it opens over the slide, then it's like you can't read anything.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. We had some really great conversation in our room. I love when we bring peers together and can learn from one another because this is not just teaching at you all, it's really crowdsourcing all of your experiences and knowledge and just growing and enhancing what we all know and what we're doing. So, moving along here, we have discrimination facing help seekers and structural barriers. So a lot of the examples really come from earlier from that poll. So assuming assistance status based on race and ethnicity, expecting assimilation into dominant culture. In our breakout room, we talked about dominant culture in certain parts of the state being religious. You know, we're in the Bible Belt, right? So dominant culture, maybe people of faith. And of which nothing is wrong with that. But if that's not what you have and everyone, has that, it can become pressure if you've had an experience. So those types of things. So using language that center dominant culture norms. Someone had even brought up like meetings being led with prayers, like assuming that everyone is in with that. Making medical notes that may stigmatize certain groups. I've seen videos and examples of this of, you know, the patient and I discussed options or patient refused treatment plan. You know, it's like the way you word it can really paint a picture of who's in the room. It can also be a barrier to them getting attention and health care in the future if that file lives with them and people read it. So expecting compliance without considering structural barriers. So microaggressions as it relates to culture, cultural humility, they're often subtle and unintentional, but they can cause real harm over time. The example I just gave with medical, just the way you word the notes in someone's medical notes, if someone else reads it, they might think, oh, this person's always, exaggerating. This person always is this, or, they're difficult as a patient, so I'm going to come at them. It really does, even if it doesn't, outwardly, it's still kind of giving some messages. Language is really powerful. So documentation and language matter. They can empower or they can marginalize. And structural barriers are often invisible, but they impact access and trust deeply. All right, so practice responses, cultural humility in action. So some of these strategies are asking open questions without assumptions. So tell me what's important for me to know about your experience. I can give an example from our breakout room that I'm not naming names, but someone had shared that there was an assumption that someone was on a diet because they were eating fruit. So, it's like, oh, well, what are you eating? And like, just an open question, like, which of your fruits are your favorite? Or, whatever, like, what are some, I don't know. Can't make a question on the spot, but coming up and just is telling someone why they're eating someone is probably not the right move. Um, so use person-centered language, avoid labels, avoid telling people what they're doing and why, avoid making identity-based assumptions. And create psychological safety by normalizing questions about preferences and needs. So this could be, being really transparent about documentation and how information is used. As like a example, another example could be instead of saying like, "Are you on assistance?" Really open would be like, "What resources help you right now?" Instead of "You're difficult," like going back to the medical notes. I noticed this is challenging. How can I better support you? So these simple language shifts can make a big difference in trust and engagement, transparency, and respect build connection. Next slide. All right, so challenging power and privilege in care. Again, with the privilege is not that you get things handed to you. It also can just be the absence of things being taken away or blocked from you. So power is always present in helping relationships. Being aware of your own power and privilege helps avoid unintentional harm. So remember, structural issues shape behaviors. It's not just about individual choices. And just as a note, how being managed and policed by professional culture sends signals of unworthiness, danger, or deficiency to people of color. So that can exasperate power imbalances, inequality, legal status, and discrimination. And just, again, really putting it into perspective of power, anyone that can create a narrative about you has power over you. Even if they are helping you, if they say you are uncooperative, if they say they have concerns about you, anyone that is able to do that and you have to defend your good name, they have power over you. All right, moving on. All right, so quick challenge. Which of the following demonstrate cultural humility? Select all that apply. We're going back to that mentee again, same code 98791750. So the examples here are treating everyone exactly the same without asking questions, asking about language needs and preferences, avoiding assumptions about family or support network, documenting behaviors differently based on race, ethnicity, and or language, and acknowledging power imbalances and asking how to better support. So which of the following demonstrate cultural humility? I still see some answers coming in. I will give you a moment. We're getting close to a stopping point. So the correct answer would be asking about language needs and preferences, avoiding assumption about family or support networks, and acknowledging power imbalances and asking how to better support. Incorrect would be treating everyone exactly the same, because this ignores individual needs, and documenting behaviors differently based on race and ethnicity, which can be stigmatizing. So, cultural humility requires tailoring our approach to each person's needs, not treating everyone the same. If you have heard me speak ever in life, I've said this a million times that I am against one size fits all approaches in everything. Recognizing power and asking for input are essential. So, again, asking for input is a way to avoid knowing it all. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we are here on final takeaways. So we want to shift our language from difficult or non-compliant. These are labels, these are assumptions, and they're very surface level. They don't go underneath. They're not inquisitive. So we want to move to activated by structural challenges. So we want to shift again from assuming to inquiring with respect and humility. Really being open. Again, we don't know it all. We have no idea what is going on. If you have come to the previous sessions, I will forever reference the video of everyone's captions, right? We don't know what people are bringing in today. We don't, and on this call alone, I don't know what your all's mornings were like. I don't know what your night was like. I don't know how you slept. I don't know what you're facing when you go home today. So really just being open, respecting, being humble, asking open questions. And the key messages really are that cultural humility is a lifelong practice, not a checklist. I'm going to share this again, no names, but from my breakout room, I really appreciated that there was someone with lived experience in the room that talked about even having walked in the shoes and having experienced something directly, even in that position in working with clients, still had to be humble because they had one experience which gave them enough of an ability to relate, but still had to not take that one experience and just blanket it and apply it to every single person. Just still continual self-awareness, continual openness. So it's also to creating a safe, inclusive space improves trust and outcomes. So I think everyone can relate to that. If you know you're walking into somewhere where people are not making assumptions, where they will ask you questions and allow you to tell them what's on your mind, they're not judging you, I think everyone would probably feel more comfortable. As far as inclusive spaces, we did discuss as well that even when you're helping, you can leave people out if you're helping and you're well-meaning, but you're still assuming that your help is helpful, you may not be aware of who you're not helping and who is not being served. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And so everyone can help interrupt bias and foster belonging. So if you, again, if you have gone to the previous sessions or you are able to look in the drive and see, I'm thinking back again about the cognitive bias wheel. Like there's so many ways. No one is above this. Like there are so many ways that people can have an assumption, whether it's conscious, subconscious. I mean, that's a lot. It is truly a lot. So, this session is not about people walking away feeling like, oh my gosh, like I am not culturally, like I'm not good at this. I'm not competent with cultural humility. Like, this is a practice. This is something that everyone thinks about, refines, and again, with the foundations of engagement, if you damage, repair. This is all about having relationships and keeping the door open with people who are help seeking. So these shifts in perspective really help us see clients and colleagues as whole people who are navigating complex systems. And your ongoing commitment to humility is what builds safer, more equitable care environments. All right, next slide.
Awesome. So yes, absolutely, Tony. We'll make sure to have a copy of the cognitive bias codex. We'll get that over to you. All of the slides as well. And then we also have all of these details and the materials for like the references that we're using in the notebook that Taryn created before the session. So I'll make sure that everybody has all the materials afterward as well through the OneDrive. We have the recording, we have the slides, all of these notes. And of course, all of these materials are for you all to be able to use in your settings. There's no such thing as stealing in Navigators of the Commonwealth. It is all just preventing us from reinventing the wheel. So if any of these elements are useful for you in your own workplace, take and run with it. These slides are just yours to take and use. We really appreciate it. Yeah. So Kieran is sharing this kind of piece around the mindfulness method, if it's helpful. Kieran, would you mind to come off mute here and tell us a little bit about this? Don't want to put you on the spot, but I love this as a framework.
Sure,
Me
thank
too.
you.
I've
Yes,
been
it's
commenting
something
left
that
and
I
right.
use myself whenever I'm communicating with people, whether it's at work or outside of work, personal interactions, nonprofit, ministry, etc. Just to be respectful of other people. I really, really love enjoy coming to these sessions and hearing you all speak about these things. I do a lot of this kind of work as it is, and I have for many years. Um, I think personally, for me, what I've noticed that tends to work a lot is showing respectful curiosity, and not making negative assumptions or even really positive assumptions, because sometimes that can be detrimental as well, in other ways that we may not initially recognize. But it's having respectful curiosity, asking people about, their culture, where they come from, if there's differences there, asking someone how they arrived to where they did logically and why they think the way they do. But again, in a respectful way, right? That shows value and genuine interest and intentionality whenever you're speaking to other people. So that's kind of just where that comes from.
Love that, Karen. Awesome. So some shout outs here in the chat about this. The respectful curiosity makes you feel not just accepted, but wanted in that setting, creating that kind of fostering of belonging that Valerie was talking about. And this idea too, that positive assumptions can be detrimental as well. That really goes back to what I was talking about around that's kind of stigma progression, right? Is that we can create ideas like the model minority, right? For Asian American folks, different kinds of assumptions that you think would be positive, but they lock people into expectations for their behavior that aren't based on who they are as individuals, right? So really great points there, Kieran. I'm wondering, Kristen and Susanna, if there were any other insights that you all wanted to share from your conversations in the breakouts with the whole group with the little bit of time we have here.
Yeah, I think the comments shared sort of reinforce what everyone's, approached already, that those assumptions, we go into, we have to adjust. There's some great awareness of just being self-aware going into it. So even where it doesn't necessarily impact that end conversation, being aware, being conscientious of how you're approaching something and how your assumptions may be impacting your work going forward.
Sounds great. Kristen, what did you all talk about?
Yeah, I think several different things. A lot of it that has been shared today already by other speakers, but also looking at it, as in our prompt, right? When we oftentimes think of the help seekers, but then also then sometimes making assumptions about our colleagues, right? Who oftentimes as helping professionals, we have to wear a lot of different hats. And kind of what are we sometimes maybe asking our colleagues or assuming that they have the bandwidth or privileges, right, that Valerie has been bringing up. And that's an assumption that we always can't assume. And so some folks gave some different examples of that. And so I think it's very wise that we also think about our help-seeking individuals, but also then our colleagues who we work with in these settings.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, especially when we think about the ways that sometimes like disclosing our experiences, especially around stigmatized kinds of topics like mental health, the criminal legal system involvement as helpers, we can't necessarily often disclose that, right? You're trying to keep that veneer of professionalism, all of those kinds of pieces. We really don't know, even if you're in a position of the kind of power Valerie is talking about, where as a helper, we can write the stories of the clients that we serve here, that power dynamic of being able to determine also who has access to what kinds of resources. we may assume that all of the other kinds of helpers that we work with don't have different experiences with receiving services or with those different kinds of lived experiences, because that isn't necessarily part of their role, right? So I think that's super, super important here. And then a couple of different pieces out here in the chat that I want to elevate. Of course, we'll get this all at the SharePoint link in an email. If folks don't get that for any reason with the follow-up email I'll send out, you just get in touch with me and I will resend it directly. OneDrive can be a little bit cranky with UK. So if you don't have the SharePoint after I send the follow-up email this afternoon, Michelle or anybody else, you just email me directly and I'll make sure that you have it here. And then Waveney says out in the chat, for those in any minority status, race, religion, ethnicity, sexuality, gender expression, I think approaching them with respectful curiosity can go such a long way to feel safe and special instead of different. And that's been the case for her. I love that kind of like the safe and special, right? And seen as a person as opposed to just a combination of different kinds of traits that people are shortcutting who you are based on how they're assessing your appearance or your behavior and all of that. Meg says, I remember the breakdown from elementary school when you assume, right? Assume is making an ass out of you and me, right, Meg? That one, yes, exactly. I'm just going to say it out loud there with that one. Sharon says, true partnership and collaboration welcome supports contribution from all partners. Yes, absolutely, right? This is about how we activate all of the folks in our helping network to feel really welcome and included. And we're all on the same team, right? I guess I really feel like this space of the football teams and sports teams gives us a really nice metaphor for how we think about how we can break down some of those tribalism barriers. It can be really fun when we understand the rules of the game and like that we're all friends and we're all playing the game together here. But how do we create that kind of environment where we're breaking down assumptions about people based on their team, right? That they might associate with. So I encourage you to, especially given the times that we're in when we're talking about cultural humility and all those different kinds of pieces, this metaphor of sports teams, I think, is a really helpful way to think about this without getting folks to think about some of the divisive issues that can be in the public discourse. Being able to think about cultures around our teams gives us a really nice metaphor for all of that. So thanks for that report out here. Let's do a little bit of reflection for the end of our session. What's one action you'll take to practice cultural humility in your work? Same QR code, same Menti poll, 9879-1750. Let's learn from each other in terms of how we want to take what we've learned here and our reflections into action. Let's teach each other. Let's give it a moment for folks to think and chime in on this. You can go to menti.com and use the code or use that QR code. And I'll say, as folks are chiming in with that, apologies for the weird floating gray box situation. I am not sure what's going on with that with Zoom. That was like my chat box. So sorry about that. We'll see if we can get that tech issue resolved last time. Okay, great. So what's one action you'll take? Let's see some of what people came up with. Ask appropriate questions. Don't make assumptions. I love that, right? What's a great antidote to an assumption is a curious question, a respectfully curious question. I love the golden rule, right? Keep in mind that golden rule of do unto others as you would have that done to yourself. Be more curious. That is such a great framing for this. Never neglect nuance. Ooh, someone's got an alliteration with their takeaway. I love that too much. That's really wonderful. That's a slogan bumper sticker. Attend further meetings. Yes. And also invite other navigators to the team to keep kind of building our culture of help seeking together and our resilience as a team of helpers. Self-awareness, using the tools to watch my words and actions. Absolutely. This is all really about knowing ourselves and bringing that knowledge into how we're interacting with people. Ooh, I love engaged in improved appreciative inquiry. Listen more. Several of us were at a training earlier this week that was using appreciative inquiry as an evaluation tool. So love this appreciative inquiry shout out in the chat. Being more self-aware before going into a meeting. Love that. Just take that moment to check yourself and coming into a space and understanding, what am I bringing into this space? What might other people be bringing into this space so I can be really self-aware to create as much inclusivity as possible? Sharon says, being mindful of the impact and also positive assumptions too, right? Varsity Valerie says, borrowing Megan's train of thought with the assume, but check myself before I wreck myself. Absolutely here. Other things from the chat, being more conscious of what I do and ask questions. Love that so much. Kieran's method. Thanks, Kieran, for your respectful curiosity approach. That's super helpful. Don't assume, ask questions, awareness, learning to observe and understand before speaking. I love that. That listening, that active listening kind of stance that we bring into this kind of cultural humility work. To show respects. That's a fantastic. Then become familiar with their culture from the experience of that person seeking help. What does their culture mean to them? How do they define their culture? What is most important about their ways of life to the help that they're trying to seek, right? So love all these. Be conscientiously compassionate, read the room. Such wisdom in this report out from the mentee. And I'll also make sure to send out, because we had some good interaction in the mentee polls, the link to the mentee so that you can see these results and refer back to them if you would like to, in addition to the other materials later this afternoon. All right, so with our last few minutes here, it's time to vote for our next topic. We wanted to add a few more here for you to weigh in on. And just remember, as you're voting for our next topic here, that the topics are going to bump around, like they're going to move around on the list. So if you want to vote for a specific topic, go ahead and put the name out in the chat or a short version of it out in the chat, or use the QR code, because as people start voting, it'll jump around and it'll make it so whatever was number 1 before will be number 3 or something like that. Yes, cue the Jeopardy music. Do, 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 do. I can't pull up the screen share, so you're going to get me singing. Do, 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 do. All right, go ahead and give those that input on our topics. Hope that's coming in. Oh, that all came in all at once here. Keep it rolling on in. Great. And if you don't have access to the Menti, just be sure to put the name of what you want to do out in the chat, like Jackie just did here. Thanks, Jackie. Keep the votes coming in. Looks like we've got a horse ahead of the race here with navigating boundaries, but keep those votes coming in. Do. We'll just give it a minute or two here with my bad Jeopardy music. Thanks so much, Tony. Oh yeah, responding to crisis without escalation, Kara voted for. Let's do 1 more minute here of voting for folks to add their ideas. Looks like we've got a clear winner, though, with navigating boundaries at this point. And then also when helpers need help, responding to peer burnout, responding to crisis. Awesome. Thank you all. And feel free to email with any ideas for topics that we don't have on the list. Like Valerie said before, this is really like a learning collaborative community of practice where we are all experts, we are all learners. So we really want the conversation to be driven by what you all think is most important to support helpers in our relationships with each other and the people that we are supporting. All right, more coming in on the poll. I never get tired of seeing these little polls update and move around. It's just, and I also, when Kelsey and I are in the main room, we watch your little microphones bopping around there too. That's always fun. All right, 1 more minute here for votes, but I think we're going to be hitting navigating boundaries, balancing professionalism and compassion as our next topic for October. And then we'll vote on these other topics that we had a lot of consensus on, lots of interest in next October at our next session on navigating boundaries. We'll look at the items 2 through 7 again. And see if we want to vote for a clear winner for our November session. And then we'll go from there. All right. So any last words of Valerie, Varsity Valerie, take us home.
Oh gosh, I left my parting tribute in the chat already. I said that we appreciate you all for joining these sessions and for being open and supportive. I won't read it verbatim because I'm not going to make the assumption that you all haven't read it already. But just really glad to have this space. We have some lessons and things that are woven in here, but I think the richness of this group is just everyone chiming in, engaging, interacting, really giving us lessons as well. I think that this is just really more of a space, like not a training. And we know we really appreciate you all. We know that this is not mandatory. You're not walking away with a CEU, and yet we continue to have people coming back, returning, bringing others. So yeah, just if you would like to invite someone who is not here and you think that they would benefit, please do. Otherwise, we will be sending a follow-up with resources and we will keep the momentum going.
Thank you, Varsity Val. And one last thing before folks sign off for lunch, if you're on East Coast time here, a reminder again about our peer reentry group that we're getting going here on Halloween. It'll be very spooky for our first meeting on October 31st. We'll be kicking off our peer reentry group. Brittany and Jackie, who are here on the call, will be leading that conversation along with a couple of other folks who work in jail settings around reentry areas. So if you also work in that very complex, I would argue one of our most complex system navigation kinds of spaces, we would love to have you in the reentry group where we'll be taking some of the Navigators material and really applying it to that specific challenging but very fulfilling and important context for navigation work. So last call there, and otherwise we'll see you all in October for our session on navigating boundaries. Thank you all for making this the highlight of the month, for coming together and creating this culture and the space for helpers and help seekers. Have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the rain. Hopefully everybody's getting rain for their gardens, their fall gardens, and all of that. We'll see you in October. Don't hesitate to be in touch if we can help with anything in the meantime.